Hi guys, welcome back. Back with another video. The second one I'm making today, which is March 10th. And I know haven't done any videos in quite some time, and I'm trying to make up for it right now because I have been reading big time. Okay, so I'm very happy to talk about Walter Allen, the English novel. I came across this book in a used bookstore in Ottawa. I was super psyched to find it because there's a big one, the history of the novel that I want to read by this guy. I'll just put it right there. I can't remember his name. I have one of his other books and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's an expensive book. It's like $50. But having come across this at the used bookstore for $10, I also came across a book called something like The History of the German Novel or German Writing or something. So I thought the two would be, great. So anyway, I love this book to pieces. It was extremely useful, gave me a lot of new information, and also helped me to fill in some details. I suppose the biggest thing I drew from it was some recommendations of different novels I should read. The ones that the author thought were the best representations of different periods and different authors, right? So for instance, what's it called? The History of Tom the Foundling or whatever is it Fielding? That was, I think, his highest recommendation for 18th century novels. He rated Vanity Fair extremely highly. He mentioned some authors I had never heard of and that seemed worth looking into. One author that I want to look into that I really hadn't heard of before was Meredith, George Meredith, and his book, The Egoist. So The Egoist was, according to our author, Walter Allen, the best of Meredith's books. And he quotes a passage from Meredith in this text. And the point he wants to make is Meredith has a very beautiful language, and the quote he took from Meredith in this book was really quite striking. Really quite amazing prose. So this book is wonderful, and then it takes us from, for instance, Pilgrim's Progress. That's the subtitle, from Pilgrim's Progress to Sons and Lovers. So basically, he takes us right up to basically 1940s, I guess, and the last person he talks about is D.H. Lawrence, and so D.H. Lawrence and Wells, and of course Irish dude, what's his name, James Joyce. These are the people, especially James Joyce and D.H. Lawrence, are the people that he says are the best of his era. Okay, so this book was first written, 50 years ago or something? Something like that. So obviously it's a little outdated in the sense that it doesn't take us up to the end of the 20th century. So it was first published in 1954. So yeah, it's, believe it or not, it's almost 70 years old. But it would be really funny, wouldn't it, to see someone like this talk about the last half or the second half of the 20th century. But what are you going to do? I mean, hindsight, you need a certain amount of hindsight, right? So, and he's also saying, like, it's very interesting, in the last couple chapters, he's very tentative, and he says, well, these look like the best writers at this time, He says D.H. Lawrence and James Joyce. Anything I disagreed with? Well, he loves Charles Dickens. He thinks Charles Dickens is the ultimate. And so, I mean, I don't agree, and I can't agree. Now, let's go back a step. Okay. Even an amateur like me quickly realized the big difference between 18th century and 19th century novels. It's very clear. It might be harder to vocalize or articulate what the difference is. And Walter Allen, his definition of the novel is the presentation of basically, he says, the full presentation of the human psyche or something. So the full presentation of life, so to speak, in its fullest sense. Okay, so it's the presentation or explication of a person or a moment or something like that. So that's not quite obviously what the 18th century guys are up to. The 18th century guys have very complex plots, complex, I don't know if that's the right word, but multifaceted, I suppose. It's a series of events, think of Don Quixote or whatever. I mean, Don Quixote is practically, a series of 100 different events, right? And if you think of, for instance, Moll Flanders, same thing. You see, basically, it follows the life of Moll Flanders, but it's over so many sort of events, and it's not, you don't find passages of deep psychological analysis like you would find, for instance, in George Eliot or Thomas Hardy or whatever. So that's the fundamental difference between why you would call the 18th century novels still progressing, still kind of trying to move towards the full novel that we know and prize in the 19th century. So in that, so take that definition and then look at Charles Dickens, for instance. I mean, his book, aren't his plots sort of reminiscent of that earlier kind of series of sort of disconnected or disjunctive episodes sort of strung along with reference to one or several different characters? The most unified presentation of a character in Dickens is probably David Copperfield. So it's very different from the full treatment of a character, like you would find in the Brontes, like Jane Eyre or something like that. So I really like, barring his love of Dickens, I really like his tastes, I guess. They resonate with me. Again, I haven't read as many of the books as he has, but according to the books that I have read, I really trust his judgment, right, in that sense. So I definitely recommend this. I mean, I like knowing a thing, like what is the English novel. I like knowing the history of things. I like knowing context. So I imagine, most people who study literature in university, they get that. But I didn't study literature in university, so I didn't get that. So I have to go and sort of find it and figure it out for myself. So I really like this novel, this book. He mentioned another one, which I saw in the used bookstore at the same time, but which I didn't know about, I never heard about. It's called something like The Liberal Tradition or something like that, which is another study of the history of the novel that this author, Walter Allen, was quite fond of. So I'm going to look into that book, and hopefully I can get a copy of it at some point, and hopefully gain some more insight into the history of the novel. Anyway, so that's it for this video. So I really highly recommend this book if you want to know the history of the novel, and if you want to know some of the best books of each author. Well, first of all, who are the best authors, and what are their best works, what are their weaker works, and something about, for instance, the difference between the novel as it began sort of in the 18th century and how it grew in the 19th, and then really became, quite an experimental medium in the late 19th and early 20th century. You know, you think of, you know, the experimentalism of Virginia Woolf and James Joyce, amongst many others. So there you go. Highly recommend this book. I'm sure it's not the only book on the subject, but I just really liked this book. It was really enjoyable, really profitable. So thanks so much, guys. We'll talk to you again real soon.